Hello, my name is Sarah Alicia Garcia, and I will be doing my EDU 1107 project on Mr. Lev Vygotsky and his social interaction theory. So I'm going to first start out with a little bit of background on Mr. Vygotsky. Mr. Lev Vygotsky was born in Western Russia in 1896. He graduated with a law degree from Moscow University. Vygotsky had no formal training in psychology, but he did begin working with Alexander Luria and Alexei Levontiev on the Vygotskyan approach to psychology. At this time, his research in how children solve their problems that has surpassed their level of development has influenced Russia profoundly. Okay, so this has had a major impact on how Russia looks at education. So the main principle that we want to focus on, or the main concept that Lev Vygotsky believed, is that learning is cognitive development through social interaction. Okay, so there are 4 underlying principles to the social interaction theory by Mr. Vygotsky. The first being that children construct knowledge through example and interaction. So we learn through our parents, our siblings, or other interactions with our peers, with our teachers, with different people that come throughout our lives. We are learning through their example and our interaction with that example. The second underlying principle of the social interaction theory is that development cannot be separated from its social context. So we learn by example and interaction what is socially acceptable. That's why in different situations, we're going to have different interactions. If we are interacting with our friends, it's going to be a different interaction than when we are interacting with somebody like our boss, because we have learned through example and interaction what is going to be socially acceptable for those specific situations. The third principle in social interaction theory is that learning can lead to development. As we learn things throughout our lives, we become the adults that we are. So our experiences, our teachings, everything leads to our development as human beings. And the last principle, the fourth principle of the underlying principles for social interaction, is that language plays a central role in mental development. As we learn to speak, we learn how to be human. And that's how we become human, is through language. So the main social learning theories by Vygotsky is that Vygotsky examined how our social environments influence the learning process. And according to Vygotsky, the learning process takes place through interactions students have with their peers, their teachers, and other experts. The first is our peers. We learn how to behave through our peers. Our teachers lead by example, and other experts give us information on how to behave socially. So the teacher's learning environment, teachers can create a learning environment that maximizes the learner's ability to interact with each other through discussion, collaboration, and feedback. So we discuss, we collaborate, and we give feedback by creating small ideas and creating one big central focus. And the feedback is very, very important for us to develop as learners. And that is a very important thing to give as you are a teacher. Social interaction, the belief is that social interaction leads to continuous step-by-step changes in children's thought and behavior that can vary greatly from culture to culture. So this is why you would notice such a drastic difference among cultures, because vocabulary, syntax, and tone are all learned through social interactions. So your language is constantly varies based on who you're talking to. So for example, if you have a Boston accent, if you're born in Boston and you have a Boston accent, and you come and you move down to Florida, your Boston accent may diminish slightly. But if you go back to Boston and are back surrounded with people from Boston, your Boston accent is going to come back. So based on your proximity to people and who you're around, things are going to change in your language. And so your syntax, your tone, even your vocabulary will change based on who you're talking to. Similar principle with when you're talking to your boss versus when you're talking to your best friend. You're going to have a completely different language to it. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about development. Development depends on the interaction with people and the tools that the culture provides to help form their own view of the world. Okay, so there are 3 ways a cultural tool can be passed from one individual to another, or 3 ways that we develop and learn how to behave socially. And that is imitative learning, instructed learning, and collaborative learning. So now I want to go through each one of these individually. The first is imitative learning. That's when one person tries to imitate or copy another. So as you can see in this picture, there are 2 older gentlemen and a young boy, and he's doing the exact same hand gesture as these 2 men. So he is learning how to behave in this specific situation based on how the 2 adults. So he's imitating their action. Okay, so that's one way that we learn, and a lot of that we get from our parents. We learn how to speak from first our parents, our siblings, and then our peers and our teachers. The next is instructed learning. So we remember the instructions of the teacher and then using these instructions to self-regulate. So if you see in this next slide with instructed learning, we are seeing a teacher teach this young girl how to tell time. And then we see the younger boy on the second picture of him trying to figure it out himself. He's self-regulating how to tell time. Now, as adults, we look at our watch and we are able to tell time, but that's only because we are remembering the instructions of our teacher. And that could be a classroom teacher, that could be a parent, that could be a sibling. Whoever taught us how to tell time, we're remembering that original instruction on, everything is by 5s and this is how you count time. And that's how we're able to read a clock based on that original instruction. The next slide we have is about collaborative learning. So a group of peers who strive to understand each other and work together to learn a specific skill. So if we have a group of students working together, their different experiences are going to work together to obtain a common goal. And that's what collaborative learning is all about. So here you see these 3 boys working together towards a common goal. So we talked about how language is a very essential part in Vygotsky's beliefs. So in the next slide, we see that Vygotsky argued that language is the main tool that promotes thinking, develops reasoning, and supports cultural activities like reading and writing. So imagine if we did not have language, whether it is Spanish, English, any form of language, we would not be able to communicate if it wasn't for this. And this is how we develop as humans, is through language, is through communication. So as a result, instructional strategies that promote literacy across the curriculum play a significant role in knowledge construction, as well as the combination of whole class leadership, individual and group coaching, and independent learning. So these are all specific things that we can do as we can use as instructional strategies to promote the language and our social interaction. So how can we relate this to our classroom? I've read a lot about Vygotsky and his social interaction theory, and it seems to me that he would appreciate a differentiated classroom. Okay, so instruction that supports social learning is one, students work together on a task. As we saw in that previous slide, collaborative learning is very important. So if we have our students work together on a task, then they are accomplishing a similar goal. And they're working based on where their experience come from, working together on that task. The second thing is developing a community of learners in your classroom will allow the social interaction to take place. The third is collaborative learning and group work. So that's similar to number 1. And then the fourth is discussion-based learning, using the Socratic questioning methods. So we must note that teachers must create an environment where directed and guided instruction can occur. So we need both of those interactions and instructions to occur within our classroom. So in the next slide, we see that Vygotsky's ideal classroom, his ideal classroom would be a teacher would use a scaffolding method. Okay, so scaffolding instruction is an instructional technique which teachers offer support for student learning new skills by systematically building on their experiences and knowledge until they can apply new skills independently. So we would use that step-by-step process of we gain a little information, we build on that information, gain a little bit of information, build on that information. And we create sort of a scaffolding method to teaching. So scaffolding is described as the process of offering guidance and suggestion in relation to a specific task or action. In this process, children are the main constructors of the task, and adults are more highly skilled peers more highly skilled peers offer suggestions and guidance. Scaffolding works closely with the zone of proximal development. So how close we are to the people that we're learning from. So how do you scaffold? The first thing is model performance while thinking out loud. Also, pair advanced learners with developing ones. So we're going to create a heterogeneous pairing system. Provide prompts, links, guides, and structures. And then we as teachers are going to fade when appropriate. When a student understands the concepts, we don't need to teach them again. We don't need to be there the whole time. We are going to kind of fade away slowly when appropriate. So in a nutshell, we are presenting the I do, you do, then we do. So in conclusion, Vygotsky developed the social interaction theory, asserting that learning occurs through social interactions. So the last thing that we're going to do is some discussion questions. So I've posed 4 questions for you. The first is, how would you use the information learned from Vygotsky's social interaction theory in your classroom? Do you agree that social interaction plays a role in the learning and development? Would you add anything to Vygotsky's theory or alter any of his underlying principles? Did you learn any new information about child development from this presentation? So I invite you to comment below on any of the discussion questions here. And it was great to present on Vygotsky, and I learned a lot of new information. Thank you.